what we're going to do today, I want to do the 5 levels of pleasure. When's the last time you guys heard the 5 levels of pleasure?
Today.
No.
We'll do it right now.
Yeah?
We had something with, someone was pleasure this morning. But
He didn't do the 5 levels of pleasure.
No,
Yeah.
just
Okay.
whether he would do adultery or not.
You've heard the 5 levels of pleasure,
I've
right?
not.
Are you serious?
I've not.
So, hearing the 5 levels of pleasure, I rarely ever teach this class. The reason I rarely teach it is because it's considered probably the hallmark class of this institution called Eshet Torah, where Rabbi Weinberg, Zatzal, may his name be for a blessing, he kind of tried to shift gears on the Jewish world and change everything towards pleasure. Wonder why? You know, the answer is that everyone's total heathens today. Everyone's into pleasure. Everyone realizes they want the greatest pleasure. So he said, listen, if everyone in this world's after pleasure, so why don't we just kind of repackage Judaism for pleasure? And he created this genius class called the 5 levels of pleasure. And here it is. So I think that all of us would agree that we're going for pleasure. I'm sure all of you are in this room right now for one reason, and that is that you thought you might get more pleasure out of being in this room than something else. Of course, it's a mature pleasure. This isn't like the kind of pleasure of an ice cream cone in the square or walk in the park or playing sports or cranking music or something like that.
You were much better than all those things.
Well, it's a more mature pleasure, and we're going to go through those different levels of pleasure. But the first thing to note is that the opposite of pain is wrong. The first thing to know is that the opposite of pain is a lack of pain. Because pleasure is what you get when you put your pain into it. When you work hard on something, that's when you get the most pleasure. Think about it. What's the most painful thing you've ever done in your life? What was the hardest thing you did?
What I did was, good question.
Of all your accomplishments, what was the hardest thing?
Hardest thing was,
Married 40 years, man.
I know, it's been pleasure.
Pain and pleasure. Yeah.
I can't imagine the hardest thing to do. I had gone through chemotherapy.
Whoa. That's probably the hardest thing.
What could be pleasurable about that?
Let's ask him.
Being over it was the best thing about being pleasure. You know, that was the most painful thing, going through that.
I didn't mean pain like pain. I meant like thing you put the most sweat into. Yeah.
Like if you bodybuild and you get a
A
six-pack.
couple of businesses that I started.
And did you get a lot of pleasure?
I did.
Get a lot of money.
Okay, great. How about raising your kids?
Loved it.
You put a lot into
A
it?
lot of effort into it.
A lot of effort and got great pleasure?
Lots.
Marriage?
Yes, lots.
Put a lot of effort?
Yeah, as much as possible.
Got a lot of pleasure?
Yep. A lot of pain, too.
Pain and pleasure. So anyway, the point is for us is that the opposite of pain is not pleasure. Pleasure is what you get when you put a lot of effort into something. You put the sweat and the pain into something that counts, something that's worth it for you, and you put in that effort, you get the pleasure. Whereas people who are avoiding pain, which is really our generation's doing in a major way, avoiding the pain, trying to get the pleasure, wind up going for cheap, immediate pleasures, and never getting really the true pleasure in life, the great pleasures that are available in life. They miss them because they're so busy avoiding pain. Yeah, what's your name again?
Brett.
Brad?
Brett.
Brett.
Yeah. What if to some people pain is the pleasure? Serious. Like, what if
There are
some
people that like cutting themselves.
You mean like cutters and stuff?
Yeah, to be serious. Yeah, I mean people that actually enjoy their own pain. And that's
Yeah, so they're not enjoying their pain. When it comes to cutters and other people who are involved in self-mutilation, or any other thing that it could even be someone who like works out so their muscles are just killing, or someone who goes and boxes and wrestles and wants to get smashed around, or even could even be a surfer who paddle out in giant waves or whatever. When all those people who you think love pain, it's not that they love pain. What they hate is their emotional pain, and the physical pain is a way of medicating for the emotional pain, meaning in a way it numbs them from their emotional pain. you'll find that people who go for physical pain are usually dealing with tremendous amounts of emotional pain. And in order not to feel it, they can just go for the physical pain. And that's what they're all about. But it's not pleasure they're seeking. And they don't get pleasure out of the cuts. All they get is a chance to not feel the true emotional pain that they're suffering. It's a mask for emotional pain.
Of course, but what if some people, that's the only thing they know is suffering?
No, for those people, they need help. And the main help
Possible use seminar.
No, they should not come to the Possible Use seminar. No. They should avoid the Possible Use seminar. It's not fair. It's not fair to join a seminar with. I run seminars. It's group work, and you don't come into a group setting, to have like, Mount Vesuvius volcanically erupt in the middle of the group. That's not exactly fair to a whole group of people. But the best way is through therapy, to get into a safe environment with an excellent therapist, if they exist, and they and to have the emotional pain come out instead of just the physical pain of the cuts, and let it out once and for all. Back to our business. The 5 levels of pleasure. So since we're all into pleasure, let's discuss ways of getting that pleasure. So the most famous way, that is the most popular today, in fact, most people are kind of relegated to this level, is, I'll put it at the bottom here. We'll call it the 5th. Oh, no.
There's another one on the table right there.
Let's hope this one's better. Oh, yeah. We'll call it the 5th class pleasure. This is out on the wing. You'd be strapped to the wing for this pleasure. Okay, 5th class pleasure, which is physical pleasure. Physical pleasure, things that money can buy, would include sexuality. This is the physical pleasure, and this is what most people are up to. Very few people really get beyond it these days. They're just pure physical pleasure, hedonistic physical pleasure, ice cream, beer.
Is that like instant gratification then?
Yeah, instant gratification, all the stuff that people go for today. And hey, it's a pleasure. It's certainly pleasurable. I'm a surfer, so I'm out surfing, all the time. This week the waves are particularly big, so us surfers are really happy this week. Cold is good for us. It means less people are in the water. It kind of separates the men from the boys. We like cold. And if you're Hasidic, it makes it a little better, just as far as girls on the beach. So there are no girls on the beach, which is just perfect for us Hasidim. So the problem is there's a couple girls in the water, in wetsuits at least, but whatever. So anyway, I'm a surfer. There's nothing wrong with a little physical pleasure. I enjoy also a burger here and there. I've got a serious penchant for boutique beer. And I like
Microbreweries?
Yep, I love wine as well, and all that stuff. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. You got to keep it kosher. Keep it kosher physical pleasures. If you're Jewish, you're kind of locked into the kosher limitations, but everything's basically kosher. Anything I ever loved to do was kosher. People ask me what did I give up to become observant growing up as a surfer in California. Nothing really. I do everything I ever did then, and I do it now. I just do it kosher. There's nothing I was into. Lobster. If lobster is so good, why do you need all that sauce? Butter. Why do you need the melted butter sauce? It doesn't even have that much of a taste. It's hype. It's all hype. What do I need this scavenger lobster? It's like the rat of the sea or something. Okay, so anyway, that's 5th class pleasure. What distinguishes 5th class pleasure from 4th class pleasure is that you would give up some of it to get the 4th class pleasure. The 4th class pleasure is love. Love and connection, just interconnectivity. Interconnectivity is a greater pleasure than the physical pleasure, and we give up a lot for that. You'll see that. That, for example, someone might go from just having like casual relationships with people, and then they'll just lock themselves into one person, like like Jim did for 40 years now. Yeah, we just had our 20th.
Cool.
Yeah, so you've doubled me. Yeah. So, but you know, there's pleasure of dating many people, but there's a greater pleasure of love. That's worth being with just one person. You now get locked in because now it's your income halves, meaning whatever your income was before, meaning what you had to spend, you now have to buy for two now, everything. Which means you're probably going to be buying a home, which means you're going to be paying a mortgage. It's all the money that you would have used for physical pleasure is now suddenly getting taxed, or not taxed, but tapped in honor of love.
In love.
Huh?
What about love? It's a pleasure, right?
It's a great pleasure, but you'll give up a lot of physical pleasure for it.
Really?
Sure. Well, you know, if you're asking that question, you're probably not ready for it. But people just get to a certain point in life, different ages, where they just say, you know what? I think it's worth giving up some of this physical pleasure to go for the love. I want some love in my life, and which includes often kids. It's a great pleasure.
They call it wisdom.
What's that?
They call it wisdom.
Wisdom. Maturity and stuff, growing up and stuff. But after a while, people would like to have kids, which just increases the love, you know, the love you have in your life. You know, you have these kids. Kids love you. It's amazing how much kids love you. You know, I just asked my 4-year-old the other day, I said, who do you love more, yourself or your father? He says, I love you. I must. They can't help it. They just can't help it. They don't have enough identity yet to love themselves, so what they really love is you. And he gets these little fish eyes. He looks all droopy-eyed and comes in for a kiss and a hug. And it's so sweet to be loved like that. It's the sweetest thing. Now, of course, I'm not a vampire for love, so I don't like pull it all out of them. I really put it in them. You know, a lot of parents are like so hurting for love that they get it from their kids. It's fine to experience their love. It's a beautiful thing, but your job's to put it in them, not to be always pulling it out of them. You don't want to be withdrawing their love. You want to be adding love into their lives.
Why can't we do the same at once?
You can. I'm just saying be careful to make sure you don't forget, you know, that you're putting it in, not just withdrawing. Some parents are like, you know, they don't say much, but once in a while they'll say, do you love your daddy? Do you love your mommy? Tell mommy you love her. Tell daddy you love her. You're like, you know, leave me alone. So they don't just pull it out. You want to put it in.
So what you mean is that you're giving up some of the time on the surfboard. You're giving up that time, the physicality of it.
Yeah.
Spend more time on the love end of it. I think that's what he meant by it.
Sure. It's a little less time on the board, a little more time with your honey or with your kids or whatever.
Or the guys, or whatever it is you do.
What's that?
Growing with your partner.
Growing, sure. And the other thing is, just a funny story, is there was a very wealthy man who had a lot of kids. He had like 6 kids. And his wife was pregnant. And they're about to give birth. And another very wealthy man who him and his wife were not able to have kids, he said to him, you know, why don't you sell me your kid, you know, that was just born. The baby was born. He said, will you sell me your kid? He said, you can sell your kid? He said, yeah, I mean, you got 6 kids already. It was your 7th kid. I have no kids. Just, you know, either give them to me or sell them to me. So I'm not giving you my kid. I'm not selling you my kid. So I'll give you $1 million for the kid. He says, I don't need $1 million for my kid. My kid's not for sale. I'll give you $10 million for your kid. $10 million, forget it. This is my last $50 million for your kid. Now, this was already money for him. This guy works very, very hard. He's worth several $1 million. Worth several $1 million, but he doesn't have $50 million. So again, but he's indignant. He's like, what are you talking about? My kid's not for sale, not for 50, not for 100, 200 million. Doesn't matter, no price. He says to him, you know, if you're telling me that you wouldn't sell your kid for $50 million, yet you're working 10-hour days, you barely ever get a chance to see your kid in any real quality way. Why don't you just take the kid and give up all the work you do all the time? Meaning he didn't really want to buy his kid. He wanted to tell this workaholic man that since you're not willing to sell your kid for $50 million, yet you're working all the time and never seeing your kid. And so the man promised him, that's it, from now on I'm coming home early, go spend time with my children.
Had he asked to buy the kid when he was a teenager, that would have been a different story. So I know, hey, you would take the
You would have sold him too, right?
until he passes the teenager.
Anyway, the point is make sure, why did I bring up this story? Just make sure you're not ripping yourself off. If you do have some loving relationships in your life, make sure you're not trading in bad ways. Make sure you're not like so busy doing the work thing while meanwhile you're leaving your loved ones hanging. Because you trade the physical for the love, but it could be you're trading back sometimes. And be careful not to trade. Yeah.
Now I kind of see what you're saying about giving up certain things. And I know that it's different when it comes to animals, but I had a dog, up until like 2 weeks ago before I came, I had to give him back. And the reason why I gave him back was because I loved him too much and I didn't have time for him. And I think that part of love is sacrifice.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, and now we're going, yeah.
From that anecdote that you just said, it was like, you work a little bit less to have more time with your kids, right?
Yeah.
But work, does that mean you're considering work a pleasure? Because it's a means to provide for your family.
Sure.
I love my job.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It's definitely a pleasure. It's definitely a pleasure. And it's paying for your family. They're very related. I'm just saying don't lose track of what's what. Meaning you're working to pay for all this, but makes you get a chance to enjoy all this instead of just always working for it. A lot of people, they work so hard. I mean, you get these immigrants to the U.S. They like come from Morocco and they got like no dough. And they work to put their kids through school and everything, but they never see their kids. How many taxi drivers I've had in Israel that never get to see their family? Never get to see them. I understand they got to make a living and they got to pay for everything, but they don't get the pleasure. They get it on the weekends. They take the kid out on the weekends. Okay, ready for third class pleasure? Okay, remember what we want is pleasure, but once you categorize it, you start to shift your priorities around a little bit. So the third class pleasure. Now third class pleasure. I realize keep things uniform here. Fourth class, third class. Okay, this is love. Third class pleasure, very few people ever get to at all. Society is not really built for it so much, although I feel like in the last few years, people have been getting more into it, into third class pleasure, a little bit on the streets. You see how like the streets of the U.S. are getting angry. Have you noticed that in the news over the years? The last period of time, they're getting angrier on the streets. People are starting to say, you know what, we're not happy with the status quo. Yeah, St. Louis. They're particularly angry in St. Louis, but New York doesn't seem to be so much happier these days. Anyway, but number 3 is a cause. What are you living for? Okay, what's your life about? What's life about in general? What's worth? The only thing you know, one sec. The only thing you know when you're born is that you're one day gonna die. That's the only given.
Taxes.
So what was the point of it all? What was the point? What was your life for? And this is very important. This is actually the most important question of life. This is right ahead of who you marry. Who you marry is the second most important question. The most important question is what life's for. What's your, not only what life's for, but what your life's for. What are you doing here? What's your life about? And when you get that answer...
It also depends on the circumstances, right? If you're born into nobility, it depends where you're born, how you're born, what time. Like, it's a lot of factors that you can't control. I'll answer that question.
Once you get that answer of what your life's about, then you get a whole new level of pleasure.
Choice.
A whole new level of pleasure that you'll trade these for. Meaning you can have physical pleasure that you'll trade to have family and love. And you'll even trade out your family and love not that you're trading them in, but you'll have less time with them to fulfill and pursue a particular cause.
Moses did it.
Moses did it, sure. Moses had a serious cause, right? Let my people go. And he left his wife and kids, and I leave my wife and kids every day for my cause. And thank God she, as I said, who you marry is the second most important decision. First most important is what the cause is. Figure out what your cause is. Once you got what your cause, you marry someone who likes the cause. Why? Because chances are, if you have a real cause, you'll be sacrificing for it. And so she sacrifices for my cause, and I sacrifice for her sometimes on this cause. Because I believe in the cause. I'm in the cause. I'm with it. That's my cause too. So it's really important you share a cause with your spouse. Share a cause. Let's ask our 40-year anniversary. You guys share the cause or not so much?
We do. It's teaching.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. We teach in different ways. She teaches in elementary school. I teach in business world and things like that. So, and of course the kids. You're teaching your kids constantly.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. Education, amazing cause. So anyway, so this cause, when you have a cause, your life gets more pleasurable because now you know why you're living. Because why am I living? What am I, like a hairless ape? Like, I mean, think an orangutan has no cause. Jumps from trees, runs around, has a great time. Okay, and if you put yourself in a MRI, if you put a human being in an MRI and you put a gorilla in the next MRI, in another MRI machine, you put them on the screen, on the scan, you're not going to see that big a difference between us.
Doesn't it intensify maturity? If you look at now your pleasure. Because as we go from 5 to 3 now, it's a huge change between the maturity of the pleasure in course and in physical pleasure.
Sure. Yeah, this is all increase in maturity. But there are many people who are victims of society, and even though they're kind of maturing, they don't ever mature to cause. A lot of people don't mature to cause. I remember, I won't mention who, but someone once said to me, older person who should have been of a high level of maturity, said to me, there's nothing worth your life. No, don't do anything that would ever risk your life. Nothing's worth your life. Not family, not Israel, not friends, not Jews, nothing's worth their life.
He didn't get past 4th class.
No, he didn't. He didn't. He got to 5th and 4th, and lives those, and certainly is dedicated to them. But cause doesn't ring high on his list. What?
You have a cause without wanting to die for it.
Not wanting to, but willing to.
Yeah.
Without being willing to die for it.
The more you're willing to die for
Would
it,
you die for education? Would you go to Nigeria and risk your life to teach people?
Not Nigeria. I'd come over here.
If you're not going to willing to die for it, then you're not taking it seriously.
well,
It's very serious.
no, you can be willing to die for it, or even not willing to die for it. But the more you're willing to die for it, the greater pleasure it'll be.
Higher the risk, more the pleasure.
Yeah, it's more pleasure if you're willing to die for it. But you know what? Forget willing to die for it. How about willing to live for it? It's a lot easier to die for something than to live for it. And think how many boys join the IDF. Yeah, all these kids go to the Army, and they go to the U.S. Army, and they go to all the different armies throughout the world. You know, they're willing to die for their country, obviously. But get one of those soldiers to go around every day, to wake up every day. It's 8 in the morning. And by 9 in the morning, he has to go and talk to the citizens of the country about what a wonderful country it is. He has to live for it. And that's his job. He's got to walk around and talk about how great the country is, door to door. How long do you think he's going to last?
He's gonna get bored.
That's why it's interesting. It's easier to die for something than to live for something. But one of the keys here, how do you get to the cause? How do you get to this pleasure? Figure out what you're willing to die for. Don't die for it. Just figure out what it is you'd be willing to die for, and then live for it. Live for it. What are you willing to die for? Live for it. That's the principle. In fact, there's a guy who once wrote a song. I was in a band with him. It was a God rock band. And it was a really funky band. It was called the Returning Light Band. I was the lead guitarist and backup vocalist. Anyway, his song was, what are you willing to die for? Live for it. What are you willing to die for? Live for it. Oh my gosh, it was such corny songs. I loved it. That was really fun. Okay, so what are you willing to die? Figure out what you're willing to die for and live for it. So, for example, I'm willing to die for the Jewish people. I really am. I'm willing to die for them. I'd do anything for the Jewish people. If it was determined that I could do something to help the Jewish people in a major way or save them in a major way, but it would mean I would have to die doing it, I would do it. I would die doing it. And therefore, I go to sleep every night trying to get enough sleep and wake up every morning trying to have enough energy and enough immune system so I stay healthy and well. And I eat for it. I eat very healthy. Sprouted spelt bread with apricot preserves is basically all I've had in my body today. And it's all, in the end, I'm living for it. Living for the Jewish people. Thank God I have not been in a situation where I had to, I've definitely risked my life for a couple of Jews. I didn't have to die, but I put myself in the line of fire a couple times already. And, but I live for it. And what a pleasure. It's a greater pleasure because I got a cause. So think about it. Just think about what you're willing to die. Anyone want to raise their hand here who's willing to die for something? Okay, great. What do you got? Excellent. Israel? Joshua, what? Family. Excellent. Anyone else willing to die for something?
I wouldn't die for neither of those.
I understand. Okay. What are you willing to die for?
You got to put your family in front.
So you do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
Trumpeter, who was defeated by the Arabs at that time, so he said, Tov Lemukar, saying, it's good for die for our land. But in order to win a war, you have to let the enemy die for what he wants. Willing to help the enemy die for what they want.
Interesting.
You win.
That's what Trumpeldor said?
I'm adding, Trumpeter
Oh, you're adding to
to
it.
die for what your cause. I said, to win your cause, your enemy has to die for their cause.
Right. Yeah.
I think Patton said that.
Really?
Yeah,
Mind single out.
Patton said that. You gotta make the poor die.
All right. Good. So let's keep moving. We're doing fine. The second class pleasure. Okay, we're getting up to the top. Now this is not, meaning you trade these for this, but here this is a direct outflow of cause, and that is that's the second class pleasure. Second class pleasure, and that is making that difference. I imagine you've taught some people and saw it made that difference. How'd it feel?
Felt great.
Great. Greater than even the cause of education?
Yeah, seeing kids accomplish things, absolutely.
Well, it's the fruit of the
Seeing them.
Sure. This is a direct outgrowth of it, but you can have a cause. You can have a cause and just feel its pleasure. Like, for example, let's say you love Israel, or you love the Jewish people, or you love Torah, or you love, I'm bringing up all Jewish stuff, but you love the whales or something, or you love tuna fish or whatever. You love something. Okay? You love dogs, yeah. So you get the pleasure. You get the pleasure because it's something you love, and you put pictures up about it, and it's like you're into it. You're part of a web. You're part of a what do you call those? A chat. What do you call those things? Blog over it, and chat rooms, and it gives you pleasure. You have this like higher cause, but you're not necessarily doing anything about it. When you do something about it and you make that difference, it is an unbelievable pleasure. Raise your hand if you ever were there for somebody in some way that made a big difference for them in their life. Okay, raise your hand. Okay, and keep your hand up now. Raise it high. Don't give me an L bracket. Give me a vav, yeah? Now keep your hand up if that was one of the greatest pleasures you've had. Okay, you see, it's the same people. Because you experience second-class pleasure. Second-class pleasure is making that difference, and we have to remember that. You got to remember what great pleasure it is. Why? Because so many of us, even though you all raise your hands, you'll find that you don't necessarily get that all the time. You get it on those magical moments where you got to make that difference. But I'm telling you, there's great need out there, and if you made that difference consistently, daily, you would get that pleasure consistently and daily. The second-class pleasure of of actually making that difference for your cause in this world is available to you all the time. All it means is you live the cause all the time. Now, how are you supposed to live the cause all the time? You got to make a living, you got to do other things, you got other priorities, So the answer is you just hit it during the day. Could be during your lunch break you hit it, could be in the evenings you hit it. You just got to hit your cause at some point during any particular day where you get in touch with the cause and you have kind of a set thing you do for the cause every day. Do something for the cause every day. Now, some of us are so dedicated to the cause that you should not be paying for it. Let other people pay for it. Start your own, tax-deductible organization or something. Start an organization on it if you're so into the cause. But if it's just something that you're going to do on the side, just get some of it done every day. Other thing is get feedback that you always get to look at. Yeah, the email feedback, any kind of feedback where it's a great pick-me-up. You ever woken up on the wrong side of the bed and you got an email or a phone call or someone thanked you for the difference you made? Yeah. Quick pick you up. Picks you up real quick. And it's amazing to get feedback from the difference you made for people. So that's all second-class pleasure. Clear? And it's an outgrowth out of cause. It just means live the cause and make the difference for other people. You guys ready? First-class pleasure. Okay, here we go.
You never have enough room?
No, we got room. First-class pleasure is, ready for this? Okay. First-class pleasure is, I'm just thinking of the best word to use. Okay, the best word to use is, you guys got to help me with a word. Fusion, becoming one with, unity. Unity. Synergy. Unity with God. Maybe some people prefer the word walking with God. We could put walking with God. Unity with God, walking with God. But this is the highest pleasure. The highest pleasure is to be at one with your Maker. At one with the Maker. And you trade everything for it in general, but you don't need to, because when you eat that delicious, what's your favorite ice cream, Barbara? Favorite flavor? Really? So when you enjoy that peppermint ice cream, well, guess who's in all the flavors? Guess what's in your tongue sensing the flavor? It's all God. So you can totally walk with God and fuse with God. Benjamin Franklin said that beer is how we know God loves us.
Beer?
Beer is how we know God loves us, yeah. Benjamin Franklin said that. And I happen to be very into beer, and wow. Like,
Ben Franklin had the national language of Hebrew.
he what?
He was a Mason and also a Hebrew scholar, like many of the founding.
Oh, he was a Hebrew scholar?
And they consider Hebrew as a national language.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, no.
Physical pleasure, totally fused with God. How about in our families? Fusing with God in the love.
God be a cause, but that doesn't really work.
Can be. Can be. It's a little selfish, maybe. I guess if you shared others fusing with God, maybe that would be good. But you yourself fusing with God as a cause, it certainly should be your cause. But when we said cause, we meant more like healing the planet type cause. Making a difference for the world. Okay, so fuse with God in your physicality. Fuse with God in your relationships. Fuse with God. Make sure the cause you have makes a difference to God as well. Meaning, figure out, what do you think God's problems are right now in 2014? What are God's number one problems? Like, I'm sure if we set it out, we're not going to do it on the board. We don't have time right now. But if we set it up, what are like the top 5 biggest problems if you were the creator of the universe that you're dealing with? So you might think there might be maybe the ozone layer, maybe the people killing each other, Africa, hunger, ISIS. Like, these are all different causes, but
For some people, it's
People are problems.
anyway, but you can figure out, you can actually get cause, is figure out what would God be what problems would God want solved? And this is a great way to partner, by the way. I mean, if you're trying to conquer some problem in the world and you want to beat it, so you need partners, right? How about the Almighty himself? So figure out a problem that God thinks that also is like of the top 10 problems or top 5 problems in the world, and you've got yourself a great partner. And in fact, I could even promise you, if you can hit like the top 3 problems that God has, that you'll have large siyata d'shmaya, or a great divine assistance in fixing that problem. So like you'll suddenly, money will come for it, all kinds of things will come for it. You know, we said, my wife doesn't do any fundraising, but we had a war with Lebanon several years ago, and we just weren't expecting it, and we didn't have a way to get the kids out of the north, and where to even put them. We just were totally unprepared for them to be bombarded with bombs. So my wife brought down 1,250 people from the north. It was parents with their kids. We had some 800 kids, and the rest were the parents. And she fed them, clothed them. She sent the buses up into the bombs, to the missiles flying, and brought them down. She raised $250,000 in our laundry room. Okay, we had a little laptop in our laundry room, and she raised $250,000 in our laundry room to pay for all of this.
That's a lot of laundry.
This is large siyata d'shmaya, meaning great levels of divine assistance. Yeah, she was getting large siyata d'shmaya. Why? Because she had a cause that, like, kids under missile attack. You know, like, that's one of God's causes. Within 2 days, she had $250,000. You know, good luck right now if she decided on some cause to raise $250,000 in 2 days. But then it was like, boom. Yeah, it just came. And getting the bus drivers who were willing to go into, most bus drivers weren't so interested in going up there. But everyone she called, he was just like, okay, let's go. Let's do it. Okay. Then making that difference is like being God. It's godly to be the person making that difference for somebody. For example, God's job is to feed ants, aardvarks, feed plants, the sun, feed animals, the plants. Like, God has to feed every dolphin and every whale. We've got to feed all these things. But somehow when it comes to human beings, we're on our own. Or are we? The answer is that God wants us to interact and then feed ourselves. And you'll notice that you've always been fed. You've always been fed, and the truth is God's been feeding you this whole time. But via human interaction, we're the only ones that God requires human interaction to be fed. Otherwise, everyone else gets fed. It's kind of weird we've been left hanging. Well, we haven't been left hanging. God wants us to work it out and make sure that everyone's eating. And you'll notice you've been eating all these years because someone's always making sure you got something to eat. So you're playing God. When it comes to the cause of making that difference, that's really God's problem. It's God's problem that everyone eats. It's God's problem that these things get solved. So when you make that difference for somebody, you're playing God. And it's a very incredible, it's a powerful feeling to make a difference for somebody because you got to be God in that particular case. You're not God, God's God. But God, you got to be God's partner in something. If, in a way, let's say you gave money to someone who needed to eat, you loaned God money because God's in charge of this guy. And, oh, God just used you. So he loaned you money. Now you have less because you gave your money to this guy. So where are you going to get money from now that you gave your money to that guy? Well, I can't think of a better being than God to owe you money. You know, if you borrow money from somebody, they may pay you back, they may not. It all depends how they're doing financially. God, lending God money, you're going to get paid back. You always get paid back from God. He's God. God owns all the banks in the world. This is God's creation. So whenever you give tzedakah, you're loaning God money to keep the creation, you know, keep human beings alive, keep them eating, keep them going, whenever you do that. So you're really loaning God money, and God will pay you back. Don't worry about that. God will always pay you back. Not only that, that's physically. How about spiritually? You want to help out your fellow person spiritually? You could even argue that that's even more important. You know, it'd be like, bringing another person to a higher spiritual place than they are at is ultimately, all the resources you put into that, you're doing it ultimately for God. And you think God's not going to pay you back? It's going to pay you back. Rabbi Weinberg, that's all he used to say, that if you saved someone's son from drowning, but you had to use the father's rope, and you got the kid out, but in the end the rope sank. You know, you grabbed the kid and the rope sank into the sinkhole. And you say, okay, I just owe you a rope, sir. Here's your kid, sorry I lost your rope. He says, is he gonna hit you up for the rope? Or is he gonna say, don't worry about the rope. Thanks for saving my kid's life. So he'll let you off the hook for the rope. So the same thing with God. You bring anyone closer to God. And it cost you a little bit. You had to put some resources into it. You're bringing one of God's children closer to him. He'll pay for it. He'll cover it. Yeah. So anyway, that's first class pleasure. And what I didn't get into is the actual mitzvah of devekus with God, like actual fusing with God. Just total being at one with God. The reason why I didn't bring it up is that is the subject of most of my classes. I have about 80 hours of classes on how to fuse with God. And that's what we're always talking about in my classes. So I decided not to go there just now because we're covering this whole topic. But in a way, you could almost say Aish Torah hires me to handle first-class pleasure for the program. That is my job, is first-class pleasure. So I lead meditations and programs and all kinds of stuff to help people get whatever is distorting their vibrational pattern that should be aligning with the Creator. Is that my life's work has been how do you get the distracted frequencies, the interference patterns from blocking my clean flow and connection to the Creator. And I actually have not run one of my seminars in 4 months in Israel. I've been running them in Canada and New York, but tonight's the big night. It's opening night for the next week of seminars. It's 6 nights straight, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. 4 hours a night, each night this week, and it is the experience of a lifetime. You will not recognize yourself on the other side, a chance to reinvent yourself. He's coming, so he's got a little lump in his stomach, but I know that lump. Every time I put myself back in the line of fire of personal transformation work, I always have that same lump. And I'm a trainer, I should be relaxed. I'm never relaxed because I know I'm about to recreate myself, and it's scary. It's scary, yeah. Anyway, but that's tonight. There's a group leaving from the gate here at 6:30. If anyone wants to come, I certainly will let people check it out for an hour or two. I'll give a little chicken exit right before the commitment circle.